In September of 2007, Randy Posh, a university professor at Carnegie Mellon, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and given a terminal diagnosis of 3 to 6 months left to live, gave what he called the last lecture. Posh was about to leave behind his wife and 3 children, and he wanted to give them a little bit of a tzava, a sense of who he was. And so Posh went through with his witty humor, and he gave his lessons on life. The lecture was recorded, became a big hit on YouTube. It actually became a book, published and known as The Last Lecture, which I highly recommend. And although Randy was the last famous person to come up with the last lecture, this notion of the last lecture is not a new one. I'd like to turn your attention to the last lecture of Sefer Devarim. For in essence, Sefer Devarim really is a collection of last lectures of Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu begins the last lecture known as Etzam Vayelech, this morning, one of the last lectures, this morning's Parsha. And it begins in a very peculiar way. Source number 1 on your sheets. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. You are all standing here before God. Rashechem, Shivtechem, Ziknechem, Mishotrechem, Kol Ish Yisrael. Your heads, your tribes, your elders, your judges, all of Israel. Tapchem Neshechem, V'gerach Asher V'karav Machanecha. Your children, your wives, your convert, which is in your camp. Mechote V'tzacha Trev Memecha. From the wood choppers to the water schleppers. Why did the Psukim, why does Moshe need to address the entire nation as individuals? He just said, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem. You're all here. So why does Moshe Rabbeinu then need to detail each and every individual type of person in the Jewish camp? Question number 1. Question number 2. It's true that on Rosh Hashanah, the major focus and theme of the tefillah has nothing to do with ourselves. It has everything to do with the coronation of God. And the tefillah there seems to be an absence of the self. So in trying, in our struggle to make davening more meaningful, where do I fit in tefillah in general, throughout the year, and where do I fit in the Rosh Hashanah davening as well? And question number 3. You'll notice in the Shulchan Aruch and the halacha, which the Mechaber states, the very halachot that we're about to perform right now, saying Selichos and Hashmoros HaBoker. It's really source 2 on the sheet. So in the header of the halacha, the header is called Dinei Yimei Tachanunim, days of supplication. I think is the English translation of Tachanunim. What is this idea of Tachanunim? And what relevance does it have to do with the Selichos and the Tefillah process? So we'll backtrack. We'll start with the last question, Tachanunim. Where else in Halacha do we find this phrase of Tachanunim? Supplication. Where else in Halacha do we have supplication? Tachanun. And it's actually one more area that's close to Tachanun.
Yom Kippur?
No, in regular tefillah, in part of davening. There's a halacha known as Tachanunim, referred to in halacha Tachanunim. It's actually the Elokai Nitzor prayer. Right at the end of the Shemona Esrei consists of 18 brachos, and then there's an additional prayer, which is like a little bit bizarre. We're not really sure. Is it part of Shemona Esrei? Is it not part of Shemona Esrei? Right? If someone's saying Kedusha, can I answer Kedusha? It's kind of this like gray area. You'll see in source number 3, right? The Mechaber Shulchan Aruch says he's talking about his halachas of Rosh Chodesh. It's irrelevant the context, but just to understand the place of Elokai Nitzor. So in the underlying part, we're talking about someone who's not sure if they said Yal v'Yavo. In Nizkar Kodem Sheishlim Tfilato. If a person remembers to say Yal v'Yavo before he finishes davening, Chozer the Ritzei. He doesn't need to go back all the way to the beginning of Tefillah. He can just go back to Ritzei because he hasn't yet finished his Tefillah. V'im lo nizkar ad sheishlim tfilato chozer the rosh. But if he gets to the end of davening, then he needs to go back to the beginning. V'im hu ragil lomar tachanunim. There's our word. If he's accustomed to saying tachanunim, which is Elokai Nitzor. Some people say the psukim, the verse have to do with their names. Achar tfilato v'nizkar achar sheishlim tfilato kodem shiakar ragil chozer the ritzei. If he remembers while still saying tachanunim, he can just go back to ritzei. So what do we see? From a halachic status, presumably davening is not complete. Shemona Esrei is not complete until you say the prayer of Elokai Nitzor. From a strict halacha perspective, there's an equation of Mechaber is equating mashlim tfilato, finishing a tefillah, with Elokai Nitzor. So we see this word tachanunim coming up again, Elokai Nitzor. What does this seemingly innocent blessing of Elokai Nitzor have to do with Selichot? What does it have to do with the long haul of davening that we're about to undertake? So I'd like to take a step back. The Rambam, it's a fascinating Rambam. I'd like to read the whole thing if we can. The Rambam actually gives a history to how Tefillah was created. So Rambam in source 4 says, Came in Shigalo Yisrael B'Vei Nebuchadnezzar Rasha, when the Jews were exiled during times of Nebuchadnezzar, Nit'arvu B'Paros V'Yav, when the Jews were, the diaspora was widespread. V'Shar Umot, in other nations, V'Nodulam Banim Ba'artzot HaGoyim, and Jews were reborn all over the diaspora. V'Otan HaBanim Nitba'avu Sfatam, and people were speaking different languages, and it was hard to communicate. Hayisvat Kol Echa V'Echa Mi'urevet Milshonot Harbei, everyone speaking a different tongue. There was no common language. Ela b'shibush, it was all
confused.
It was a big confusion. There was people couldn't really connect with each other, communicate. Right? People were forgetting how to speak in Hebrew. They're speaking in their colloquial tongue. And everyone would kind of daven in English or whatever their language of choice was, and davening became a little bit subjective. Davening was a little bit hefker. It was a free-for-all. Everyone was kind of saying whatever they felt like. So Ezra is based and decided to create a set, rigid text, which we know as Shemona Esrei. Shemona Esrei brachot al seder, 18 blessings. Shalosh rishonot shavach laHashem, shalosh achronot hoda'ah. The first 3 blessings are praise to God. The last 3 are thanks. The emtsayut, and this is the part we're going to focus on. And the middle portion, yesh behen sheilat kol hadvarim shehein kol avot lekol cheftzei ish v'ish utzarket tzibor kulan. The middle 12 brachot, which actually became 13, the middle section of Shemona Esrei became a kind of a launch pad for any type of request, anything you under the sun you could imagine to want. You could find a place within the text of the middle brachot. That's how Chazal designed the 12 and ultimately 13 middle brachot of Shemona Esrei as a springboard for every request under the sun. So my question to you tonight is, what in the world is this Elokai Nitzor prayer all about? Why do we have a tachanunim attached to the end of tefillah? If when Chazal were creating the very text of the 13 tefillot, they were supposed to incorporate every possible request we could have, anything personal, anything that we were struggling with. There's a place for it. So what do I need an extra paragraph? How are we to make sense of Elokai Nitzor? So I'm going to take you on a little Lamdisha journey, and we're going to learn a sugya, a little complicated sugya, but it's simple. There's a discussion throughout the Talmud of a principle called Ksav al Gave Ksav. There's a principle when it comes to writing. What happens if I write something, let's say in red ink? I write something in red ink, and then someone traces over my red ink with black ink, the exact same writing. So the Gemara, Maseches Gittin Daf Yutes Amud Aleph, discusses various areas in halacha where the question is relevant. The Gemara says, Itmar Hamavir Dayo Agabi Sikra b'Shabbos. On Shabbos, if someone takes black ink and traces over red ink, right, because it's a malacha, you're not allowed to write on Shabbos. So is it considered halachic writing when I add that black ink on top of the pre-existing red ink? Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish Ta'ami Tervayu, both these rabbis say, Chayiv Shtayim. It's considered halachic writing. You violated the principle of writing on Shabbos. Acham Shum Kotev, you did a new issur by writing the black ink. Acham Shum Mochik, and you erased the previous red ink, so you're chayiv twice. So the Gemara continues, but I have another area of halacha where this comes up. Edim she'ein yodim lachtom, ma'u sheyichdu lem b'sikra v'yachtim. What happens if you have a court case? And you have two Edim that come to the court case, they say, we saw so-and-so kill someone else. We want to testify in a certain case. But these Edim don't know how to write their names in Hebrew. I saw it happen recently. I was at a wedding, and one of the Eidim who was honored, honestly, he was a good man, but he didn't know how to write his name in Hebrew. It happens. It's not so crazy. That person wouldn't know how to write scripturally his name in Hebrew. It happens. So the halacha deals with it. Is it permissible for Beth Din to write the person's name in Hebrew, in red ink, per se, and then the person, the Eidim will come and just trace over it in black ink? Is that considered halachic writing? So the Gemara says, Eidim she'en yodim lachtom, ma'u sheyichdu lem b'sikra v'yachnu, can we write for them in red ink and let them trace over it? K'tav elyon k'tav u'eino k'tav. And this is the principle of an upper layer of writing. Is that considered halachic writing or not? And the Gemara says, Amalei eino k'tav. It's no good. But wait a second. Didn't you say a second ago for Shabbos, in terms of a malacha of ksiva on Shabbos, we said that if I write black ink over red ink, I'm chayav. I transgress the malacha. So why are you telling me for Eidim it doesn't work? Why can't it be the upper layer should be considered halachic writing? He wrote his name. And the Gemara asks the question, you told me that it's ksav in Shabbos. And the Gemara has an answer. We're not going to get into the Gemara's answer. The Gemara kind of pushes up the question, like, you're right, but that's the halacha. I want to take it a step further. Rav Soloveitchik has a wonderful, wonderful sefer called Ala Tshuva. It's written by Pinchas Peli. It's a compilation of a lot of the Rav's lectures he gave on Tshuva. I think it's translated into English also by Peli. It's available in English. Fantastic. I can't recommend a sefer for the high holidays more than Ala Tshuva. And Rav Soloveitchik deals with this particular shayla. And the Rav says, let's analyze the two scenarios. Let's think for a second. What is the issur with writing on Shabbos? What are we trying to get at? What are we trying to decipher when we're looking at the red ink and the person writing the black ink on top of it? What's the issur? The issur is? Writing. Right? So when the person who traces over with the black ink on top of the red ink, did he do the act of writing? Yeah. Yes. That's why he's chayiv for Shabbos. But Rav Soloveitchik explains, when it comes to edus, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to decipher? What are we trying to accomplish when those edim are putting down their names? What's important there?
It has to be their witnessing.
Their signature. It's not about the act of writing. It's about the John Hancock. Because what is your signature? Your signature is you. No one else can write your signature for you. That's your personalized John Hancock. So you know why halacha says that Beis Din can't write the guy's name and say his name was Bob? Because the whole purpose isn't the act of writing. It's putting your imprint, putting your personalization, your uniqueness on the piece of paper that says, I, Bob, saw such and such an event. And for that, Beis Din can't create your handwriting for you. Only you can put your handwriting, can put your John Hancock on that star, on the document. And it makes all the difference. The difference between writing by Shabbos and putting your signature when it comes to Eidos. And that's what's going on with Tefillah. The Rambam gave us this lengthy introduction to Tefillah. And he said that the rabbis were trying to figure out a way to find a text where every individual can find a place to insert his Tefillah here or there. And they did that. They accomplished that in the 12, 13 middle blessings of the Shemona Esrei. They found a template, a rigid, fixed text, where anyone can come and insert or find meaning inside that text. But Tefillah is not complete unless we add our John Hancock. Unless we write our own prayer. And that's what Elokai Nitzor, the prayer, is all about. You'll notice that the 12th, let's just call it 13, it's 13 brachot. They're all written in the plural. Slach lanu, rifa'enu, barech aleinu. It's all about the plural, it's all about the community. But Elokai Nitzor, what's the first word? Elokai.
My God.
It's my God. It's individual, it's personalized. It's different from the rest of the text of Tefillah because it serves a totally different purpose. It's the prayer of the individual. And there's no blessing, and there's really no text. If you wanted to, you really could take your 3 steps back, say after saying Yehil Ratzon Imrei Fi, after Sim Shalom Shalom Rav. Because Elokai Nitzor is serving a different purpose. It's not catering to the community. It's catering to the individual. And Tefillah, as we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, is not complete without that personalized prayer, your own poetry, your own John Hancock. I heard a fascinating story I'd like to share with you. Every summer, Rabbi Moshe Plutchak, who was a Rebbe in Brooklyn, he would go up to the Catskills to spend the summer learning a particular kollel. And one summer, this guy shows up. It's a pretty intense kollel atmosphere, pretty intense beis medrash. This guy, Mr. Greenstein, shows up with an art scroll Gemara. And day after day, Mr. Greenstein shows up to learn the beis medrash. And he has the biggest smile on his face. From the look of his face, you would have no clue. But Mr. Greenstein was suffering from terminal cancer. And Mr. Greenstein, when he found out that he was only had a few months left to live, he decided he had never had a proper Jewish education. And he was going to teach himself how to learn a Gemara. So day after day, he showed up to the beis medrash with his art scroll Gemara, and he was the happiest person there. And he was an inspiration for all the kollel guys in the beis medrash. One day, Rabbi Plutchak, who had developed a relationship with this Mr. Greenstein, noticed that Mr. Greenstein looked a little dejected. He wasn't even sitting in his normal seat. So Rabbi Plutchak went over to Mr. Greenstein and said, Mr. Greenstein, why so glum? Why are you down? You're the light of the beis medrash. We all get our source of inspiration from you. What's wrong? So Mr. Greenstein said, what's the point? What am I doing here? I've been here for weeks. I'm breaking my teeth. I don't even understand the art scroll. It's written in English. Do you think God really cares? Do you think He really is paying attention to the fact that I'm coming day after day? I've had enough of this Gemara, I'm giving up. And Rabbi Plutchak says, let me tell you a story. It's a story in a story. Stay with me, it's good. Rabbi Plutchak tells him the following story. Arturo Toscanini was a famous Italian orchestra conductor in the 19th and 20th centuries. He was recognized as one of the great masters of music in his time. And after retiring in his 80s, so a biographer contacted Arturo and said he'd like to write a biography about Mr. Toscanini. So Mr. Toscanini agreed, and every so often the biographer would spend time with him. One day, the very same orchestra which Mr. Toscanini conducted was having a symphony. It was going to be on the radio. So the biographer asked if he could come and sit with Arturo while they listened together to the orchestra. Arturo said to the biographer, I'll let you come, but one condition. Not a peep. I don't want to hear a peep out of you. So the night of the concert comes, and the biographer shows up, and he's listening to the symphony. It's magnificent. And the biographer can't control himself. He is holding himself back, trying so hard not to make a peep. And the moment the symphony ends, the biographer blurts out, "That was unbelievable!" And Mr. Toscanini is stone-faced. No reaction. And after a few moments, Mr. Toscanini says, "What a shame. That symphony has 120 musicians in it. And there are 15 violinists. But only 14 of them were playing. What a shame." The biographer is like, "Are you crazy? Are you kidding me? No way." So the next day, the biographer calls up the person in charge of the symphony and orchestra and asks him, "What happened last night?" And the present conductor says, "To be honest with you, we had a symphony. There are 120 musicians, and there are 15 violinists. And only 14 showed up. I don't know what happened to one of the guys." And the biographer was shocked. They came back to Arturo and said, "How did you know?" And Arturo said, "With my trained ear, with my expertise, it was obvious. I know each and every note that's supposed to be played at which particular time. So of course I knew that one of the violinists wasn't playing." Go back to story number 1. Rabbi Plutchak looks at Mr. Greenstein and says, "Mr. Greenstein, you're right. To nobody like me, it doesn't make a difference if you never open up your Gemara one more day of your life. But to the master conductor of the world, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he'll know." The summer ends. And unfortunately, Mr. Greenstein passes. Rabbi Plutchak calls up Mr. Greenstein's home to offer some words of comfort. And his son picks up the phone. And after exchanging some pleasantries, the son says, "I want to let you know something, Rabbi. I don't know what happened that summer in that kollel. But every single time for the last couple of weeks, I saw my father open up his art school Gemara. Before he would read a few words of Gemara, a few words of the Aramaic, he would say, 'I'm about to perform for the master conductor of the world.'" Parshas Tetzavim begins by saying, Atem nitzavim kulchem hayom. Moshe Rabbeinu in his last lecture addresses the entire Jewish people. But that's not enough. Tapchem nishechem v'gerach asher karev machanecha. Moshe goes on to articulate each and every type of person in the camp, from the most chashuv to the water schlepper and the wood chopper. Moshe addresses them all individuals. Because there's a dual nature of man. We're a community, but we still have our individual voices. Some of us may play the cello, and some the violin, or maybe even the cowbell. But Hakadosh Baruch Hu, our music counts. And that's why God addresses that's why Moshe addressed each and every one of us. To say, it doesn't matter what you do, or how you sing, or what you play. I care about each and every one of you as an individual. And that's the Elokai Nitzor prayer. It's not enough. Tefillah is not over with just the text that the Rambam says. The 13 middle brachot, which encapsulate, incorporate every type of request possible. Tefillah is not done until you've written your own prayer. As a little avoda, maybe making things a little practical, I urge you all, over the next 3 days, if you can before Rosh Hashanah, great. If you can't make it for Rosh Hashanah, at least before Yom Kippur. Take the daring step. Not only to be willing to read the prayers which Chazal have given to us and laid down for us. Take out a piece of paper, old-fashioned style. Not on your BlackBerry, not on your computer. Something that's not muksa, you can bring with you to shul. It's time that we start writing our own prayers. We're about to perform for the master conductor of the world. Our tefillot matter. We matter. It's time to start writing our own prayers. Sleep.